Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, investors. Today, I have the opportunity to interview Taylor Loht, an experienced multifamily and self-storage real estate investor who has acquired or partnered on over $350 million in multifamily and self-storage real estate investment deals. He started investing in real estate in 2016 because he got tired of Wall Street's ups and downs, and he quickly learned that real estate investors have the ability to buy underperforming assets and create value. Taylor has experience on both sides of the podcast interview. I've been a guest on his podcast as well. It's a great podcast. You want to go check that out, the Passive Wealth Strategy Show. And today we're going to have an opportunity to talk not just about active investing through Taylor, but also some of his passive investments and his insights there as well. So with that, I want to welcome to the show, Taylor. Welcome.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to interview you because you have a lot of experiences that I think many of our investors are interested in, but may not have actually tried out on their own. First is that you are a licensed securities broker dealer. Tell us, how does that work? Why did you go that route? And how does that differ from many of us who are either just passive investors, or if we are active in our deals, we're out there finding our own deals, and we don't have that license. We got to do things a little differently.
Sure. So just to clarify terms quick, technically I'm the broker dealer. I'm a broker dealer rep. The broker dealer itself handles compliance, monitoring the transaction, and everything like that. So just to add some color there. But it really, to me, is a matter of rewinding the clock. So I passively invested and actively GP'd on a couple of deals. This is before COVID hit. And I found that on the active side of things, my favorite part of the syndication business was in working with investors and raising the capital. That's the part of the transaction or the investment that I enjoyed doing most, aside from, actually doing profitable deals. Of course, making money is the name of the game. So if you want to focus on raising capital for real estate syndications for other people's deals, there are some very important regulations around that to do it in a compliant manner. And the two main ways that folks do that to be compliant, to raise capital for other people's deals, are to start their own fund of funds or to become a licensed broker-dealer representative. Those are two primary ways to do it. To me, I looked at both of them. There have been a lot of services that have popped up and technology companies that have popped up that streamline the process for starting your own fund of funds. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach necessarily. To me, it just seemed like a little bit of an administrative, I don't want to say headache. It's just a matter of administrating a fund and locating the right deals, but just wasn't the right move for me at the time. And I had the opportunity that actually came about through an interview that I did with a gentleman on my podcast. And we just got to talking. It's one of my favorite ways of meeting people. And it turned out he was a licensed broker dealer representative and raising capital for deals. And I said, well, how do you do that? Can you tell me a little bit about that after had recorded the interview? And he's a great guy. His name's Tim Lyons, super great guy. And he told me what he was doing. And I said, I'd like to learn more about that. And he made some introductions. This was maybe back in 2021, if memory serves. And I said, had some further conversations over the preceding months and said, yes, this is what I want to do. So studied, took the test. That process of taking a test and everything was probably 4 or 5 months, somewhere along those lines. And yeah, just moved forward from there. Got access to deal flow and, consistently able to execute on transactions. And to me, it was a great improvement to my business because it gave some guardrails to work with, essentially, and some positive constraints, right? Because in real estate investing generally, there are almost an infinite number of options that you can pursue. But the folks who really succeed, no matter what you're in, the folks who really succeed on the active side of the business, in my opinion, one of their key traits is focus. Key behaviors is focus, and that applies to any business, right? I think Warren Buffett has talked a bit about his power of focus. So has Bill Gates. So focusing on that aspect of the business enabled me to grow and do more deals and continue to scale. So yeah, very happy that I made that move. And for me, at the time when I decided I want to go down the route of focusing on raising capital, there were so many folks in the real estate syndication industry who were, in my view, violating securities laws in terms of behaving or acting as unregistered, unlicensed broker dealers. And, that never sat well with me at all. I said, I'd rather not build a business compared to build a business based around a loose interpretation of regulations. So that's why for me, going down a route where I was confident we could be compliant and scale was so important. And we see you and I chatted a little bit about this today before we started recording, but now that some aspects of the commercial real estate market are struggling with where interest rates are and everything, it's no secret. You can Google, you can find articles about people who are struggling. Um, I think some of those chickens are coming home to roost in some ways, and it's really a shame to see for both ends. The folks who made mistakes and the passive investors who rode along with them. So I think first out, starting off with staying compliant and building your business that way is the way to go, no matter what business you're looking to build.
Yeah, outstanding, and hats off to you for doing it the right way. I strive to stay well within the law myself, and disappointed when I see people who seem to be skirting, or as you said, using a rather expansive what's being allowed. Now, a lot of people, you mentioned deals are struggling. I'm glad you did, because we need to keep it real over here. That's one of the things we do at the Foundry. And a lot of people say, like, well, what do you do for your investors? Well, I use really conservative underwriting. I'm sure you heard that 1,000 times, right? But there's more to it than that. And let's just cut right to the chase. When you are in a deal that's struggling, I mean, what do you really need to do? And it's kind of, I think it's kind of obvious, but I want our listeners to hear it from you. What are these operators not doing that they should be doing?
Well, my observation from that's a great question. My observation from the deals that I've seen, from a distance, I haven't been a part of one, fortunately, but the deals that I've seen from a distance that have been foreclosed on, a lot of them were financed at really low interest rates with generally interest rate caps that have run out, and the interest rates have gone up and tripled depending on your entry point. So their debt service cost, the cost of the mortgage every month, has just increased so significantly that you just can't make the mortgage payment. So unfortunately, from the outside, it looks like so many of those deals probably can't be saved. I've seen or heard that some of those operators have done capital calls and, you know, kind of modest participation. But if it was bought at a high price and not financed properly in maybe a market that's struggling economically from an occupancy standpoint, there just might not be anything you can do. I mean, it just is so context dependent that that really matters. Now, if there is something that an operator can do to save a deal, whether it's to, you know, one of the phrases that's common today is extend and pretend, or survive till 2025. That's kind of a judgment thing about where you stand and your stance
Right.
on whether
Will it be
interest rates are going to go up
2025?
or anything.
We
Right.
hope things get easier in a
Um,
year.
but yeah, I mean, I think GPs have to do everything they can to work to save a deal. I mean, that's all there is to it. And if there's nothing that you can do, or the deal is so far gone, hopefully we can all learn lessons out of that. Whether it's we're again watching from a distance and learning from their mistakes. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. And my estimation is that a lot of folks who have had foreclosures happening over the last year or so, There's the old Donald Rumsfeld known knowns, the unknown knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. And underwriting real estate has all four of those things, that matrix of knowns and unknowns. And I think a lot of the people who are in trouble didn't realize that they were making the assumption that rates would not go up so significantly in their underwriting. All underwriting has assumptions built into it, whether it's assumptions of the rents that you can get on the back end or the assumptions. Now you can do due diligence to quantify all these, but the assumptions of how much it's going to cost to fix up each of the units. Well, there's an assumption built in about your terminal cap rates. There's assumptions built in about what the debt market is going to look like when you either need to buy another interest rate cap or refinance or whatever it is. And I think the biggest kind of mistake that I've seen is the assumption that rates would not go up as quickly as they did. Now, they hadn't in the past, so that may not have been a super unreasonable assumption at the time, but
Right.
with the benefit of hindsight, it kind of looks obvious. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I'd like
understanding,
to jump in on that.
sure.
I've noticed that it's really always the black swan that gets you. So it's easy to say, hey, this is an unprecedented rate hike trajectory that we've just suffered through. But again, if everything was predictable, nobody's failing. We see people out there failing, and it's so true. I mean, you're involved in a lot of transactions. I am as well, but you're always going to, I think, learn more, possibly if you have your feelers out, if you're networking from other people. And I'm not in any deals that I've lost or that are even in any danger of being lost. But I've seen it out there, and I think we really do have to, I don't know what to say, for lack of a better approach. I mean, it's the information's out there. We have to benefit from it. We have to learn some lessons from it. A lot of people are getting hurt. The only silver lining is that we can look at this and we can say, like, hey, nobody expected the rate hikes to come like they did. But then again, we've been expecting rate hikes for about a decade. And we got a little bit in 2018, right? For a little while, we had some rate hikes. Those were baby rate hikes. But hey, just as nobody could have predicted that rates would stay so low for so long, nobody would have predicted they'd come up so quickly. And we really have to be prepared. You got to be prepared for the black swans. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you're 100% right. I don't know whether it's folks got too bold about what they were doing because we've had such a bull run in real estate for so long. It's
Right.
hard to say, but always preparing for those bad times, if you will. As some insight into kind of the industries, folks really shifted into those variable debt rate products because we were in a falling interest rate environment. And when you have a fixed rate loan, those tend to have on larger properties, when you do commercial property, those tend to have prepayment penalties. And depending on the nature of your prepayment penalty, in a falling interest rate environment, your prepayment penalty can go up massively in a falling interest rate environment. So we had such a bull run in the late 20 teens and into COVID. Folks shifted into these variable rate debt products that don't tend to have those same prepayment penalties that are quite as onerous as the longer term, like agency financing that
Right.
you can get. But, then again, you're in a variable rate product. So when you buy in a variable rate product at the lowest interest rates and a short term interest rate cap, it's a risky formula, and unfortunately, folks are learning that lesson.
Right. I'm glad we're getting to this deep discussion about financing because it is huge. There are other things you can do, right? You mentioned interest rate caps. You can budget for that cap, not just for the first year or the second year, throughout, right? You have to also understand that next year's cap is going to be more expensive than this one if the rates go up. And you have to, I mean, I don't know what to say. You have to think two steps ahead. If everybody did that, sounds obvious, right? If everybody did that, then nobody's struggling now. That's not the case. And yeah, yield maintenance. Wow, that's a you didn't mention it by name, but I gather you talked about yield maintenance. I don't know that many people really fully understand what yield maintenance is. But let's just say that it can be very expensive to get out of that loan. And you got into it, who knows, maybe even 80 basis points cheaper than if you choose a really nice step down. But what I like to do for myself and my investors is, okay, we'll take a higher fixed rate, but we know what it is. It's fixed. And we got a really nice step down. Like one of my deals, I've got a 3-1-1-1 step down. Okay. We paid a little bit more for that. But to know that, or maybe I think it's actually 3-2-1-1-1, but to know that even in the second year, it's not terrible to get out of it. We're not going to get out of this in 23 months. No, we're going to wait 24 months in a day. And we're going to get out with a 1% prepay penalty. I mean, that's what you'd pay to a broker anyway. It's not a big deal. But yeah, yield maintenance can be huge. So I think people need to think 2 steps down the road. And you have to prepare not just for, as you in your formulation, the known knowns and what you expect, but you have to be ready. Like, well, I want to be ready for rates to come down. So I have really nice program step downs in what I'm doing, but I've also got fixed interest rates, because what if they don't come down?
100% right. And really for those, like you said, yield maintenance. The other one is defeasance, which I'm not as informed on defeasance and its formula. Essentially, I understand it's a lot more complicated from the lenders that I've dug into it with. But it's basically when you buy a house to live in, right? You get a loan for a couple $100,000, 500, $1 million, depending on how, much you're willing to spend. When you pay that loan off, the bank or whoever the lender is, they lose out on the future return on that, basically. But when you buy commercial property, maybe they're loaning you 20, $30 million. They say, I want to know how much I'm going to make on this loan. So that's really where that yield maintenance penalty comes from, because if you were to cash them out and pay them off after year one, then they have that risk of, we got our money back. Now we didn't make all that interest that we were going to make on the loan, and we have to find somewhere else to put it. So that's really where that comes from for those that are thinking, oh, pay it off, man. How are you going to penalize me for paying off that loan? Well, the bank
Right.
or the lender, they're there to make money on lending you money. And when they loan you tens of millions of dollars potentially, or your company or your investment, they want to make that money, and they have the power to get an agreement with investors that they're going to get paid.
And I love the way that you mentioned the residential market, because everybody has some experience with residential. By the time you invest in commercial real estate,
You should.
you've
Yeah.
got a mortgage. You understand those are nice loans, really, really nice loans, 30 years and no prepay penalty. And then you get into commercial and it's like, wow, these loans they're kind of rough. I mean, the banks, they play rough, and they can play rough because the rules are different. It's not your primary residence. You don't have all those protections, and you really need to understand things like defeasance, yield maintenance. You need to understand the scenarios. Like, what if rates go way down, but we can't take advantage of it because yield maintenance means it doesn't make sense? Or what if the rates go way up? I mean, yeah, you play in the big leagues. People really need to think about that. And the prepaid penalties, I know for residential, I used to work in that industry. I mean, if you're buying a bond at like 104, and somebody prepays immediately, it's like you're getting back 100. It's like, not only did you miss out on the interest, it's like, boom, they hit you on the principal too. That's a really rough thing. So yeah, there's 2 sides to the story. We all tend to think only about ourselves. I don't know. I think that's there's something psychological about that. In fact, I think our whole conversation could really be framed in terms of psychology. And if you understand what's going on in psychology with human nature, you'll understand how people got into trouble like this. I mean, real estate, any investment, it doesn't get cheap unless people make mistakes. And if you see an investment that's cheap, it can get cheaper, right? You can lose money even after making an investment that, by all information available at the time, is a good investment. It's underpriced. The value's there, because guess what? You wouldn't have been able to make an investment in something that is underpriced if there hadn't been mistakes in the past. You don't know that you're picking the bottom, right? You have to Gotta have cushioning. Well, anyway, what I'm leading into is that I know one of the first books you read about investing, certainly one of the best books and one of the first that I read was The Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham. Warren Buffett calls it the best investing book of all time. I think he's right. I think all investing is value investing. Why don't you tell us some of the things you learned from The Intelligent Investor and why should people read this book? I mean, maybe you're a real estate investor. Why do I want to read about equities?
Yeah, so I read that book, oh boy, 13 something years ago. My copy's up here on the
Mhm.
shelf behind me right there. So it's been a little while since I read it. So the memory's not quite as fresh with me, but really based around looking for value investment opportunities and the ideas around looking for value in your investments. But I think the interesting takeaway from me and my kind of time investing in that space was how bad I am at picking stocks. I'm not better than, the best people out there. I'm not even comparable to them. And then if you look at the statistics of the professional stock pickers out there, they're also not very good at it, right? There's all those statistics about index
Most of them are
investing.
not,
Most of them are
especially when
not
you
very good
factor in
at
the
it.
fees.
Right, 100%. And that I think that gets to a lot of different things, but stocks they're a very efficient market, right? You can buy and sell very easily depending on what you're buying and selling. Your fees can be almost nothing, right? There are a lot of zero fee brokerages out there where you can buy and sell stocks and index funds and mutual funds and everything like that without paying a fee. So that allows for a lot of price discovery and everything. But I found that the difference between that and real estate and kind of what you said about my bio, once I started getting into real estate investing and meeting successful real estate investors back in my early days before I'd invested in real estate, I was really blown away by the successful real estate investors, how much they got their success from things like off market transactions or buying distressed assets and adding value to them. Before I had dug into it and met successful real estate investors, I thought the only way to invest in real estate was to kind of go to the open market, being the MLS, your favorite listing site, buy a property that's probably already in pretty good condition. And this was back in the mid 20
Right, pay the
teens.
broker
So
fees and all that.
pay all those fees, of course. People got to get paid. I understand that.
Sure.
But you're kind of paying a premium price. And for the most part, you're probably buying something that doesn't really have value add opportunity if you're buying on the MLS, especially these days. Back in the early 20 teens, there were a lot more foreclosure opportunities then to buy, and that was a little bit more on market. But that's really the thing that struck me about real estate investing is versus like publicly traded things is real estate's an inefficient market. It's more complicated to do a transaction. It's more expensive to do a transaction. And then real estate investors have a much greater ability to revise the asset that they've bought, adding value in some way.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I don't call it Mary Barra if I don't like the way she's running GM. I don't
mhm,
have any recourse there.
right, exactly. And that's the thing that struck me the most about when I first started meeting successful real estate investors about how they were able to create value. And it gets into the burr strategy. A lot of folks have used that successfully, but inefficient markets can be taken advantage of by investors to their benefit.
Yeah, I love the inefficient markets because again, I feel like you can take those investing lessons from any field like securities and apply them here. Why is it inefficient in real estate? Yeah, because it's harder. It's harder to get into. And so you have fewer people playing. You have some friction in the transaction. You've got all kinds of opportunities where if you know something, you're able to get in. Whereas stocks, you've got all these pundits, you've got stocks that are covered by seven analysts, right? Go find a stock that has zero or one analyst covering it. Now you have some potential for information disparity. Warren Buffett says I could make 50% a year if I was only managing $10 million. Well, think about that. Most people are managing less than $10 million. Go out and take care or take advantage of those information disparities. And that's exactly what you've got to do with real estate. Okay, let's hit this really quick. I
Or
see some
run for
other great ones there.
Congress. Sorry. Or run for Congress. Sorry, I had to get that in there. Please keep going.
All right. Some other great books, best ever real estate syndication book. That's why I started my podcast. I'll just hit you really quick with my observations and come back around with yours. Am I being too subtle? If you're looking for a book that's entertaining about real estate, Sam Zell is amazing. Recently lost one of the great real estate investors of all time, helped to create what we now know as a REIT, or at least to popularize and really drive that home as a concept. Capital raising, looks like you got Richard Wilson up there. He's got a lot to say about family offices. And here, I'm going to pivot a little bit. Yes, I also read the capital raising book by Hunter Thompson, the author.
Mm-hmm.
He said he wrote that book so he could say that he was Hunter Thompson, the author. I like that story.
I need to put my copy up on the shelf.
I want to ask you about jujitsu because I think that health is very important. And I think that's huge. So tell us, what is your health routine? What's Taylor Loat's regime?
Sure. I mean, you might see on camera, I got a little black eye here from class last night. I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 2015. Today, I'm a purple belt. I got my purple belt in 2022. Yeah. And train, depending on the week, 3, 4, 5 days a week, something like that. And, sometimes you get injured, you have to take time off and what have you. For me, I try to watch my health and everything, keep it a good weight and all that and get enough sleep. But for me, the practice of training jujitsu has several advantages. Now, first off, I actually met my wife at jujitsu. So, I have that to show for my training, which would be enough in its own, but even more benefits. I think it's a great kind of escape from the day and gets you focused on one sole activity. It doesn't need to be jujitsu. Maybe you like to go running or lifting weights or something like that, but getting that mental space and getting your body working on something, for me, incredible stress relief. I get some great ideas at that time. I just write them down or try to keep them in mind and review them or implement them later. I also think having a physical pursuit, trying to be better at something physically every day, week, month, something like that, that's just a practice of improvement that if you apply it to something physically, I think you're naturally going to try to apply it elsewhere in your life, whether that's with your personal relationships or with your real estate investment or what have you. So for me, it's very important to be able to train. There's also, of course, the social aspect. There's what are they calling it? I think I saw it earlier today. They called it a friendship recession, that most men in their 30s, now I'm 34, most men in their 30s, 40s and older don't have close friends. They don't have a friend group. And that's I think it's a bad thing. It's obviously an awful thing, really. So for me, going to the gym has been a great way to make a group of friends in my 30s, unrelated to like real estate. We're just friends because we have a common activity that we like to have fun. And wouldn't you know, I've gotten to do deals with some folks that I've met through jujitsu. But having a pursuit like that, whatever it is, that you like to do and you want to get better at, I think is very important. And for me, it's it helps me out. It helps me out a ton. Plus, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of things you said there I think are just amazing. Yeah, you got to get out of the house. It's so easy in this day and age. And things like we're using Zoom to record this interview are amazing. You use technology right. I'm talking about not getting caught in the scroll. Don't go to Facebook and spend an hour there. Don't spend all day, posting garbage, looking at other people's garbage. Way a waste of lifetime. But you can, I would have never met Taylor Loat if I didn't have Zoom. So there's all these amazing things with technology, but just don't live your life in it. You got to get out every night. I like to get out and dance. I do work out at home. I do go walking, but going on trails, trailing is a very solitary activity. You got to get out. For me, it's dance. I love that you're doing jujitsu. That's huge. But it's sort of like a performance art, like music. And I love how you say when you do something like this, it really challenges you to be better and you want to apply that to everything else in your life. What I've learned from sports and from music is like, consider that if in music, if you miss 1 out of 10 notes, cacophony, right? But if you get 90% in math, it's like you're a genius. Congratulations, you got an A. So whenever you have something like that, something where there is this potential for perfection, and it's not like real estate, because you can go and do your due diligence, you can go over it 10 times, and you better. But there's nothing like something that you've got to practice, and then when you perform it, it's in the moment. It's either right or it isn't. Something that drives you to over practice like that brings in the champion's mentality. There's nothing else like it in the world. And all right, just before we go into lightning round, anything you want to add?
No, I think the more when you the thing about jujitsu that I love is that it's a constant struggle, to be honest with you. There's always somebody that's better than you, unless you're Gordon Ryan, who's objectively, I think, the best jujitsu guy in the world today. You can work with and train with some of the best people on the planet because jujitsu is not a very big sport, and you can go connect with them and get lessons from them. And it forces you to be in the moment, work on the problem, and constantly work on getting better. So yeah, I absolutely love it, and I hope to continue to do it as long as I possibly can.
Love it. So now we got 7 questions, Taylor, and we got about 7 minutes to the top of the hour. So let's hit it. You could be known for just one thing. What would that be?
Contribution.
What is the greatest lesson in leadership you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Treat people like people, especially when hiring virtual assistants. There's a temptation to think about virtual assistants as robots that are cheap and happen to be overseas. But the truth is that they're people with families, priorities, goals of their own that happen to live in other countries. And folks often talk about, quote, using VAs in your business, and that is entirely wrong. You're hiring VAs for your business. And when you keep that in mind and you remember that they're people just like you, that will allow you to find better VAs, to work with them better, to give them better instruction, to, everything along those lines. That realization, and I'm sorry to admit I had to be told that, changed everything for me in hiring VAs.
That's huge. At the Foundry, we're founders, we're leaders, and a great leader is a great developer of human potential. What characteristic has been most pivotal to your success?
Persistence.
Huge. All right. Now we're going to mix it up a little bit. Oh, speaking of mixing it up, I got this stack of random cards. And instead of cutting the deck like I normally do, I just literally spilled them all over my desk. So this is going to be a little bit more random than usual. So just tell me when to stop cutting this deck, and we're going to take the top card. Look at that. They're still getting away from me.
All right, stop.
All right. What do you wish you were better at saying no to?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Cookies. My wife was a public school teacher until last year. She quit. She now manages a bakery, and I have quite literally unlimited access to cookies and sweets. And I wish I was better at saying no to cookies, sweets, and other things that aren't good for you.
Well, I'm sure that the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu helps with that, helps with the discipline, helps you to get rid of some of those excess calories. Can you name one tip or trick that investors can implement in their business today?
It's not a trick, but it is definitely a tip, is go talk to other people in your business. You started a podcast, I started a podcast, and for me, my podcast has been pivotal in my growth, not just in the content that's put out there, but in the relationships that have been started because I got folks on my podcast. the knowledge that I've learned, so much around that. So, and that really comes down to talking to people and giving them something of value, which is exposure to your audience in the case of a
Yep,
podcast.
300%. I'll tell you, just like you said, you met your wife in jujitsu, that would be enough if that were all. The people I've met through here, relationships I've grown, and what I've learned. What I've learned that's helped me as an active investor, as a passive investor, huge, super huge, super huge. All right, now I usually ask you to name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader, entrepreneur, or why, and why. We've done a lot, but still, if you'd like to go through one of those, you want to pick one, tell me, we can do that. Otherwise, we can reference our earlier chat.
Yeah, I'll say one that you didn't hit on that is super important, and I think folks aren't aware of enough, was Crucial Conversations. It's here over my left shoulder, if I could point at it. Teaches you how the tools, gives you the tools to have what they call crucial conversations, which are conversations that could change your relationship with someone irreparably. And if you don't approach that correctly, it can completely go sideways and destroy your relationship. And for me, I picked that book up when I was in my mid 20s. And that's a time where I think, at least for me, I can't speak for most men, but that's a time where your success in life is going to be really driven by your communication skills and your ability to work with other people. And that's a time where I really needed to hone those skills. So that book for me made a big difference.
Huge, and one that I haven't heard of yet. And I love it. That's another selfish reason I do this podcast, The Reading Room.
Joe Fairless recommendation right there. Joe recommended that book to me.
Okay, yeah, he's great. One of his podcasts, read his book, changed my life. Podcaster now. Okay, so if you just send us out with a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs.
So can I give you an observation that I've made and something that I've been trying to apply in my own life, if you don't mind?
Yes. What do you got?
So I've observed that if you've ever listened to Elon Musk give an interview, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in history, I think that's not really an overstatement. If you ever watch him give an interview, when he gets a question that he doesn't immediately know the answer to, he'll take as much time as he needs to think about his answer and then give it in an effective manner. Go watch an interview with him. And if you notice throughout this conversation, I've really tried to do that. Now, at this point, I'm just aping his behavior because he's a million times ahead of me. But I think in life, and this is kind of another thing that goes back to crucial conversations, if we avoid the snap response, we can be so much more effective, whether that's in business or our personal lives. If you're having trouble with a friend or a family member, something like that, if you avoid that one snap instinct gut response, take a pause, think about it, give them your answer. It makes life so much easier. So I'm trying to apply that in this field as well. Thanks to Elon.
All right, I love it. I think I need to read Crucial Conversations. It sounds like that's an outstanding book, something that's taught you a lot, and I think that it's a huge observation. It's not the massive things that we say. It's those few pivotal conversations. Isn't it like that with everything 80-20? But before we go, and I know we're at the top of the hour, email, website, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. What is the best way to reach out to Taylor Lowe?
Carrier pigeon might not work, but you can check out my show.
Somebody finally picked carrier pigeon. No. Okay.
You can check out my show, The Passive Wealth Strategy Show. If you want to learn about doing deals with us, go to investwithtaylor.com, or you can shoot me an email, taylor@ntcapitalgroup.com.
I love it. Thank you so much for this insightful interview. Greatly appreciate it. I know that you are helping tons of people through this interview and through your podcast as well. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.